The mechanic was alone in his garage, the sound of his tools clinking against metal echoing in the quiet night. He was used to working late, fixing broken-down cars and machines that no one else could repair. But tonight, something was different. The air felt heavy, and the stars above seemed to shine brighter than usual. Suddenly, a loud crash shook the ground. The mechanic dropped his wrench and rushed outside, his heart pounding. In the middle of the empty field behind his garage, he saw a massive, glowing object half buried in the dirt. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a machine, but not one made by human hands. Its surface was covered in strange symbols, and it hummed with a low, otherworldly energy. As he approached, the machine's lights flickered, and a voice, deep and resonant, filled the air. "Help me," it said. The mechanic froze. The machine was alive. What are you?" he stammered, taking a step back. "I am a guardian," the machine replied. "I am damaged. If you do not repair me, my enemy will find me, and your world will be in danger." The mechanic hesitated. He was just a simple man, used to fixing cars, not alien machines. But something in the guardian's voice made him feel like he had no choice. He grabbed his tools and got to work, unaware that his life was about to change forever. The mechanic worked tirelessly through the night, his hands moving quickly as he examined the guardian's damaged systems. The machine's outer shell was made of a material he couldn't identify, smooth and cool to the touch, yet stronger than any metal he had ever seen. The symbols etched into its surface glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. As he worked, the guardian began to share its story. "I am not just a machine," it said, its voice calm but filled with urgency. "I was created by an ancient race to protect the galaxy from destruction. My kind are called guardians, and we are tasked with maintaining balance and peace among the stars." The mechanic listened intently, his curiosity growing with every word. "What happened to you? Why are you here?" he asked, tightening a bolt on the guardian's side. "There is a war," the guardian replied. "A powerful enemy, known as the Void, seeks to consume all life. They are relentless, and they have hunted my kind to near extinction. I was injured in battle and forced to flee. My ship brought me here, to your world, as a last resort." The mechanic paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Why me? Why did you ask for my help?" The guardian's lights flickered, as if it were thinking. "You are capable. Your hands create and repair. You understand machines in a way few others do. Anne. I sensed something in you. A spark of courage. A willingness to do what is right, even when it is difficult." The mechanic wasn't sure how to respond. He had always been good with his hands, but he never thought of himself as brave or special. Still, the guardian's words stirred something deep inside him. As dawn approached, the mechanic finished the repairs. The guardian's lights grew brighter, and it rose from the ground, hovering just above the dirt. "Thank you," it said. "But we are not safe yet. The Void will come for me, and when they do, they will not spare your world." The mechanic felt a chill run down his spine. "What can we do?" he asked. The guardian turned to him, its glowing eyes meeting his. "We must fight. Together. But know this, if you stand with me, your life will never be the same. You will face dangers beyond your imagination. But you will also discover strength you never knew you had." The mechanic took a deep breath. He had a choice to make: walk away and pretend none of this had happened, or step into a world he could barely understand. He looked at the guardian, then at the rising sun. "All right," he said finally. "I'm in." The guardian nodded, and for the first time, the mechanic thought he saw something like gratitude in its glowing eyes. But before they could say more, a strange noise filled the air, a low, ominous hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The guardian's lights flashed red. "They are here." The mechanic's heart raced as the hum grew louder, vibrating through the air like a warning. He looked up at the sky, but it was empty, no planes, no helicopters, just the pale blue of early morning. Yet the sound was unmistakable, and it sent a shiver down his spine. "What's that noise?" he asked, his voice trembling. The Guardian's lights flickered rapidly. "The void has found me. They are coming." The mechanic's mind raced. He had just agreed to help the Guardian, but he hadn't expected the danger to arrive so soon. "What do we do? Can we fight them?" The Guardian turned to him, its voice steady but urgent. "We must move. They will not hesitate to destroy anything in their path. Follow me." Before the mechanic could respond, the Guardian began to glide toward the woods behind the garage. The mechanic hesitated for a moment, then grabbed a few tools and ran after it. His legs burned as he sprinted through the trees, the hum growing louder behind him. As they reached a small clearing, the Guardian stopped and turned to face the sky. "Stay close to me," it said. "Do not panic, no matter what you see." The mechanic nodded, though his hands were shaking. He clutched his wrench tightly, as if it could somehow protect him. Suddenly, the sky darkened. A massive shadow passed overhead, blotting out the sun. The mechanic looked up and saw a ship, enormous and jagged, like a shard of broken glass. It hovered silently, its surface shimmering with an unnatural blackness that seemed to swallow the light around it. From the ship, a beam of dark energy shot down, striking the ground where the garage had been. The mechanic watched in horror as the building vanished, disintegrating into nothingness. "That could have been us," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The Guardian's lights glowed brighter. "They are searching for me. If they find us, they will not stop until we are destroyed." The mechanic swallowed hard. "Can we hide? Or run?" "No," the Guardian replied. "They will not give up. We must face them." The mechanic's stomach churned. He was just a mechanic, not a soldier. How could he possibly fight something like this? But as he looked at the Guardian, he remembered its words, "You will discover strength you never knew you had." "All right," he said, forcing himself to stand tall. "What's the plan?" The Guardian extended a glowing arm, and a holographic map appeared in the air. "The Void's ship has a weak point, a power core located at its center. If we can damage it, the ship will be disabled. But getting inside will not be easy." The mechanic studied the map, his mind racing. "What if we create a distraction? Something to draw their attention while we sneak in?" The Guardian's lights flickered in what the mechanic thought might be approval. "A sound strategy. But we must act quickly. They will not wait." As they finalized their plan, the mechanic felt a strange mix of fear and determination. He had no idea if they could succeed, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't back down now. The Guardian turned to him. "Are you ready?" The mechanic took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's do this." Together, they moved toward the edge of the clearing, the shadow of the Void's ship looming above them. The mechanic's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his focus on the task ahead. This was no longer just about fixing machines, it was about saving his world. The mechanic and the Guardian moved swiftly through the woods, staying low to avoid detection. The Void's ship loomed above, its dark energy casting an eerie glow over the trees. The mechanic's mind raced as he tried to keep up with the Guardian, his tools clinking softly in his bag. "The distraction," the Guardian said, its voice low. "We need something to draw their attention away from the ship's entrance." The mechanic thought for a moment, then nodded. "I can rig up a small explosion using some spare parts from the garage. It won't be big, but it'll make enough noise to get their attention." The Guardian's lights flickered in agreement. "Do it quickly. I will prepare to infiltrate the ship." The mechanic got to work, pulling out wires, batteries, and a few other components from his bag. His hands moved with practiced precision, even as his heart pounded in his chest. Within minutes, he had created a small device that could produce a loud blast. "This should do it," he said, holding up the device. "Where should I set it off?" The Guardian pointed toward a rocky outcrop a short distance away. "There. The sound will echo, drawing their sensors in that direction. Once the explosion happens, I will move in." The mechanic nodded and hurried to the outcrop. He placed the device carefully, making sure it was stable, then set the timer. 10 seconds, he said, running back to the Guardian. They crouched behind a large tree, watching the ship. The mechanic counted down in his head, his breath shallow. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A loud boom echoed through the woods, followed by a bright flash of light. The Void's ship immediately shifted, its dark energy beams scanning the area where the explosion had occurred. "Now," the Guardian said, gliding toward the ship. The mechanic followed closely, his heart racing. As they approached the ship, the Guardian extended an arm, and a beam of light shot out, creating an opening in the ship's hull. They slipped inside, the mechanic's eyes widening as he took in the strange, alien interior. The walls were smooth and black, with glowing veins of purple energy running through them. The air was cold and heavy, making it hard to breathe. "Stay close," the Guardian whispered, its lights dimmed to avoid detection. They moved through the ship, the mechanic's senses on high alert. Every sound, every flicker of light made him jump. But he forced himself to stay focused, following the Guardian's lead. After several tense minutes, they reached a large chamber. In the center was a massive, pulsating core, a swirling mass of dark energy that seemed to suck the light from the room. "That's it," the Guardian said. "The power core. If we can damage it, the ship will be disabled." The mechanic nodded, pulling out his tools. "I'll need to get closer to figure out how to shut it down." The Guardian hesitated. "Be careful. The core is unstable. One wrong move, and it could explode." The mechanic took a deep breath and stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the core. As he approached, he noticed a series of panels around the base. He knelt down and began to examine them, his hands trembling slightly. "I think I can reroute the energy flow," he said after a moment. "If I can create a feedback loop, it should overload the system." The Guardian's lights flickered. "Do it. But hurry. They will realize the explosion was a distraction soon." The mechanic worked quickly, his hands moving with a confidence he didn't fully feel. He connected wires, adjusted circuits, and prayed that his plan would work. Just as he finished, a loud alarm blared through the ship. The mechanic froze, his heart sinking. "They found us," the Guardian said, its voice tense. "We need to go. Now." The mechanic grabbed his tools and stood, but before they could move, the chamber doors slammed shut. A deep, menacing voice filled the room. "You cannot escape," it said. "The void consumes all." The mechanic looked at the Guardian, his fear turning to determination. "We're not done yet," he said. "Let's finish this." The chamber was sealed, the air thick with tension. The mechanic's hands clenched around his wrench, his eyes darting around the room for any way out. The Guardian's lights glowed brighter, its voice calm but urgent. "Stand behind me," it said, positioning itself between the mechanic and the source of the voice. The mechanic obeyed, his heart pounding as the walls of the chamber began to shift. Strange, shadowy figures emerged, creatures made of pure darkness, their forms constantly shifting and twisting. They moved silently, their glowing eyes fixed on the mechanic and the Guardian. "What are those things?" the mechanic whispered, his voice trembling. "Servants of the void," the Guardian replied. "They are here to destroy us." Before the mechanic could respond, the creatures lunged forward. The Guardian reacted instantly, its arm transforming into a glowing blade. It moved with incredible speed, slicing through the shadows with precision. The mechanic watched in awe as the Guardian fought, its movements fluid and powerful. But there were too many of them. The creatures kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. The mechanic knew they couldn't keep this up forever. "The core," he shouted, remembering their mission. "We need to overload it." The Guardian nodded, its lights flickering rapidly. "I will hold them off. You must finish what you started." The mechanic hesitated, torn between helping the Guardian and completing the task. But he knew there was no time to waste. He turned and ran toward the power core, his tools in hand. As he worked, the sounds of battle echoed behind him. He could hear the Guardian's blade slicing through the air, the eerie screeches of the shadowy creatures, and the occasional blast of energy. He forced himself to focus, his hands moving quickly as he rerouted the energy flow. "Almost there," he muttered, connecting the final wire. Just as he finished, a loud crash made him turn. The Guardian was on the ground, its lights flickering weakly. One of the creatures loomed over it, its dark form pulsating with energy. "No!" the mechanic shouted, grabbing a piece of metal from the floor. He ran toward the creature, swinging the metal with all his strength. The impact sent a shock through his arms, but the creature recoiled, giving the Guardian a chance to recover. The Guardian rose, its lights glowing brighter than ever. "Step back," it said, its voice filled with power. The mechanic obeyed, watching as the Guardian unleashed a burst of energy that filled the room. The shadowy creatures disintegrated, their forms dissolving into nothingness. For a moment, there was silence. Then the Guardian turned to the mechanic, its lights dimming slightly. "The core," it said. "Is it ready?" The mechanic nodded. "It's set to overload. We need to get out of here." The Guardian extended an arm, creating a portal of light. "Go. I will ensure the core detonates." The mechanic shook his head. "I'm not leaving without you." The Guardian's voice softened. "You must. This is my purpose. I will not let the void harm your world." The mechanic felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to argue, to find another way, but he knew there was no time. He nodded, stepping toward the portal. As he crossed the threshold, he turned back one last time. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. The Guardian's lights flickered in what might have been a smile. "Thank you, human. You have shown me the strength of your kind." The portal closed, and the mechanic found himself back in the woods, the Void's ship visible in the distance. Moments later, a blinding light erupted from the ship, followed by a shockwave that knocked him off his feet. When he opened his eyes, the ship was gone. The sky was clear, the hum of the Void replaced by the sound of birds chirping. The mechanic sat up, his heart heavy. He had saved his world, but at a great cost. The mechanic sat in the quiet woods, staring at the spot where the Void's ship had been. The Guardian was gone, and with it, the immediate threat to Earth. But as the adrenaline faded, a new realization set in: this might not be over. He stood up, brushing dirt off his clothes, and began walking back toward what was left of his garage. The building was gone, reduced to a smoldering crater, but he knew he couldn't dwell on that now. He needed to figure out what to do next. As he approached the crater, something caught his eye, a faint glow coming from the debris. He knelt down and began digging through the rubble, his hands trembling with a mix of exhaustion and hope. There, buried under the wreckage, was a small, glowing device. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, its surface covered in the same strange symbols as the Guardian. He picked it up carefully, feeling a faint warmth in his hands. "What are you?" he whispered, turning the device over. Suddenly, a holographic image appeared above the device, a map of the galaxy, with a single point highlighted. The mechanic's eyes widened as he realized what he was looking at. This is the Void's next target," he said aloud. The image shifted, showing a countdown. The mechanic's heart sank as he saw the numbers ticking down rapidly. 3 days, he muttered. That's all the time we have. He knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed help, someone who could understand the technology and help him stop the void before they attacked again. But who could he trust with something like this? As he pondered his next move, a voice called out from behind him. Hey! What happened here? The mechanic turned to see a woman approaching, her eyes wide with shock. She was dressed in a lab coat, and her badge identified her as a scientist from a nearby research facility. There was an accident, the mechanic said, quickly hiding the device in his pocket. The woman frowned, looking at the crater. This doesn't look like any accident I've ever seen. What really happened? The mechanic hesitated, then decided to take a chance. I need your help, he said. But you're not going to believe me until I show you. He pulled out the device and activated the hologram. The woman's eyes widened as she saw the map and the countdown. What is this? She asked, her voice filled with awe. It's a long story, the mechanic said. But if we don't act fast, a lot of people are going to die. Will you help me? The woman studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right. But you'd better start talking. Over the next few hours, the mechanic explained everything, the Guardian, the Void, and the mission to stop them. The woman, whose name was Dr. Patel, listened intently, her scientific curiosity overcoming her initial skepticism. This is incredible, she said when he finished. If what you're saying is true, we need to act fast. But we'll need more than just the two of us. We'll need resources, equipment, and a plan. The mechanic nodded. I know. But we don't have much time. The void could strike at any moment. Dr. Patel thought for a moment, then pulled out her phone. I know someone who can help. He's a former military engineer, and he's worked on classified projects before. If anyone can help us build what we need, it's him. The mechanic felt a glimmer of hope. Call him. We need all the help we can get. As Dr. Patel made the call, the mechanic looked at the device in his hands. The countdown continued to tick away, a constant reminder of the stakes. We're not done yet, he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. We're going to stop them. The mechanic and Dr. Patel worked tirelessly over the next 2 days, gathering the resources and people they needed to stop the void. Dr. Patel's contact, a retired military engineer named Jack, proved to be invaluable. His expertise in advanced technology and strategic planning helped them piece together a plan to confront the void before they could strike again. The team set up a makeshift lab in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The mechanic spent hours studying the Guardian's device, trying to unlock its secrets. He discovered that it contained not only a map of the void's next target but also fragments of the Guardian's knowledge, blueprints for advanced weapons and defensive systems. This is incredible, Jack said, examining the holographic schematics. If we can build even a fraction of this technology, we might stand a chance. The mechanic nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the Guardian and the sacrifice it had made. He felt a deep sense of responsibility to honor its legacy and protect the world it had died defending. As the team worked, the countdown on the device continued to tick away. With less than 24 hours left, the mechanic called everyone together. We're running out of time, he said, his voice steady but urgent. The void will strike soon, and we need to be ready. Here's the plan. He explained that they would use the device to create a portal to the void's next target, a distant planet where the void was gathering its forces. Once there, they would deploy a weapon designed to disrupt the void's energy core, effectively disabling their fleet. It's risky, the mechanic admitted. But it's the only way to stop them. The team nodded, their faces grim but determined. They knew the stakes, and they were willing to fight. As the final preparations were made, the mechanic pulled Dr. Patel aside. "If something happens to me out there," he said, "make sure this technology doesn't fall into the wrong hands. It's too powerful." Dr. Patel placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're in this together. No one gets left behind." The mechanic smiled faintly, grateful for her support. But deep down, he knew the risks were greater than anyone realized. When the time came, the team activated the portal. A swirling vortex of light appeared in the warehouse, its energy humming with power. The mechanic took a deep breath and stepped through, followed by Dr. Patel, Jack, and the rest of the team. On the other side, they found themselves on a barren, rocky planet. The sky was dark, lit only by the faint glow of distant stars. In the distance, they could see the Void's fleet, massive ships hovering above the surface, their dark energy casting an ominous shadow over the landscape. "This is it," the mechanic said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let's move." They made their way toward the fleet, using the planet's terrain for cover. The mechanic carried the weapon they had built, a device designed to overload the Void's energy core. It was heavy and unwieldy, but he refused to let anyone else take the risk. As they approached the fleet, they encountered resistance. Shadowy creatures, similar to the ones the mechanic had faced before, emerged from the darkness. The team fought bravely, using the weapons they had built based on the Guardian's technology. But the creatures were relentless, and their numbers seemed endless. "We're not going to make it," Jack shouted, firing at a creature that lunged toward him. The mechanic clenched his teeth. "We have to keep moving." They pressed on, the mechanic's heart pounding as they neared the center of the fleet. Finally, they reached the energy core, a massive, pulsating structure that seemed to radiate darkness. "This is it," the mechanic said, setting the weapon down. "Once I activate this, we'll have 5 minutes to get out of here." Dr. Patel nodded. "We'll cover you. Just hurry." The mechanic worked quickly, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. As he activated the weapon, a loud hum filled the air, and the core began to glow brighter. "It's done," he shouted. "Let's go." The team turned and ran, the shadowy creatures close behind. But as they neared the portal, the mechanic realized something was wrong. The weapon's timer was counting down faster than expected. "It's going to blow," he shouted. "Go. I'll hold them off." Dr. Patel hesitated. "No. We're not leaving you." The mechanic shook his head. "There's no time. Go." Reluctantly, the team stepped through the portal, leaving the mechanic behind. He turned to face the creatures, his wrench in hand. "You're not getting past me," he said, his voice filled with determination. As the timer reached 0, a blinding light filled the planet. The mechanic closed his eyes, thinking of the Guardian and the sacrifice it had made. "I hope I made you proud," he whispered. The explosion was unlike anything the mechanic had ever experienced. A wave of energy surged across the planet, obliterating the Void's fleet and the shadowy creatures in an instant. The mechanic felt himself being lifted off the ground, the force of the blast throwing him through the air. For a moment, everything went dark. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground, the sky above him clear and quiet. The Void's fleet was gone, their ships reduced to smoldering wreckage. The mechanic sat up slowly, his body aching but intact. "I'm alive," he muttered, disbelief in his voice. He looked around, taking in the aftermath of the explosion. The planet was scarred, but the threat was gone. The Void had been defeated. As he stood, he noticed something glinting in the distance. He walked toward it, his heart pounding as he realized what it was, a fragment of the Guardian, its lights flickering weakly. "You're still here," he said, kneeling beside it. The fragment glowed faintly, and a soft voice filled the air. "You succeeded. The Void is no more." The mechanic felt a lump in his throat. I couldn't have done it without you. You saved us all. The Guardian's voice was faint but steady. No, human. You saved yourselves. You showed courage and strength when it mattered most. That is your legacy. The mechanic wiped his eyes, his emotions overwhelming him. What happens now? The fragment's light dimmed slightly. My time is over. But you have a new purpose. Use the knowledge I have given you to protect your world. Teach others what you have learned. Together, you can build a future free from fear. The mechanic nodded, his resolve hardening. I will. I promise. The Guardian's light flickered one last time, then faded completely. The mechanic sat in silence for a moment, honoring the machine that had changed his life. When he was ready, he stood and activated the portal device. The swirling vortex appeared, and he stepped through, returning to the warehouse where his team waited. Dr. Patel and Jack rushed to him as soon as he appeared. You're alive! Dr. Patel exclaimed, her voice filled with relief. The mechanic nodded, a tired smile on his face. We did it. The void is gone. The team cheered, their exhaustion replaced by joy. But the mechanic knew their work was far from over. Over the next few weeks, the mechanic and his team worked to rebuild and share the knowledge the Guardian had left behind. They developed new technologies to protect Earth and formed alliances with other nations to ensure the world was prepared for any future threats. The mechanic became a symbol of hope and resilience, his story inspiring people around the globe. But he never forgot the Guardian or the lessons it had taught him. One evening, as he stood on a hill overlooking the city, he felt a sense of peace. The sky was clear, the stars shining brightly. Thank you, he whispered, looking up at the stars. I won't let you down. Months had passed since the mechanic and his team had defeated the void. The world had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The technology left behind by the Guardian had ushered in a new era of innovation and cooperation. Nations that had once been at odds now worked together, united by the common goal of protecting their planet. The mechanic had become a global figure, though he never sought the spotlight. He spent his days working in a new facility dedicated to advancing the Guardian's technology, always mindful of the responsibility he carried. But despite his fame, he remained humble, never forgetting the lessons he had learned. One day, he was invited to speak at a gathering of world leaders and scientists. The event was held in a grand hall, filled with people from every corner of the globe. As he stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent, all eyes on him. Thank you, he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I stand here today not as a hero, but as someone who was given a chance to make a difference. And that chance came because of a machine, a Guardian, who believed in us when we didn't even believe in ourselves. He paused, looking out at the audience. The Guardian taught me many things, but the most important lesson was this: strength doesn't come from power or technology. It comes from courage, from compassion, and from the willingness to stand up for what's right, even when the odds are against you. The mechanic shared the story of his journey, from a simple mechanic in a remote garage to someone who had faced unimaginable dangers. He spoke of the Guardian's sacrifice and the bond they had formed, a bond that transcended species and worlds. The Guardian gave its life to protect us, he said, his voice breaking slightly. But it didn't do it because it had to. It did it because it believed we were worth saving. And now, it's up to us to prove it was right. He urged the audience to use the knowledge they had gained wisely, to build a future where technology served humanity rather than controlled it. He spoke of the importance of unity, of working together to overcome challenges and create a world where everyone could thrive. We have been given a second chance, he concluded. Let's not waste it. Let's honor the Guardian's legacy by being the best versions of ourselves, by being brave, by being kind, and by never giving up, no matter how hard things get. The room erupted into applause, the sound echoing through the hall. The mechanic stepped down from the stage, his heart full. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew they were capable of great things. As he left the event, he looked up at the night sky. The stars twinkled brightly, a reminder of the vast universe and the endless possibilities it held. "We'll make you proud," he whispered, a smile on his face. "I promise." And with that, the mechanic walked into the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he was part of something much bigger than himself.